A very warm good evening to all my professional colleagues. I, CA Mahesh Garg, welcome you all to this virtual CPE meeting on standards on internal audit, keeping pace with the reforms, organized by the Internal Audit Standard Board of ICAI and hosted by the Sangrur branch of NIRC of ICAI. Before we move ahead, I would like to acknowledge the efforts of our Honorable Central Council member, C.A. Charanjot Singh Nandaji, Chairman of the Internal Audit Standard Board, and his entire team for conducting today's webinar. Today in this VCM, we have on the virtual dais C.A. Charanjot Singh Nandaji, Central Council member, C.A. Gyanchand Mishra ji, Central Council member and Vice Chairman, Internal Audit and Standards Board, and our guest speakers for today, CA Yukti Arora ji and CA Ruchi Sadhana ji. Friends, I am having a firm belief that with today's webinar, a great chunk of knowledge will be added to our skill set, which will help us in the way we are conducting our audit assignments, especially the internal audits. Before I request for the welcome address, I would like to formally introduce CA Charanjot Singh Nanda ji. Although sir needs no introduction, CA Charanjot Singh Nandaji is a Central Council member of the ICAI and is currently serving his sixth term in the Central Council of ICAI. In my opinion, he is the most senior most Central Council member, not only from the North region, but from all the regions, I believe. He has served as a chairman of almost all the committees, as he has served as a chairman, vice chairman, or member of almost every committee of the ICAI, whether it's a standing committee or a non-standing committee. Besides this, Charanjot Singh Nandaji is a member of SEBI Advisory Committee on Primary Market between the years 2007 to 2010. He was also a member of SEBI Advisory Committee on Mutual Funds from 2007 to 2010. He has represented ICI on SEBI Committee on Disclosures and Accounting Standards. He was also the convener of the expert group constituted by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India on investor protection. He was also a member of the Southern Asia Federation of Accountants Committee on Professional Accountants in Business. He has also served as a chairman of the Northern India Regional Council of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India during the year 2002-2003. Now I request here Charanjot Singh Nandaji for the welcome address and keynote session.
Thanks a lot for your kind words, CA Mahesh Garg. I'm thankful to the Sangrur branch for hosting this program. My honorable co-chairman, CA Gyan Mishra, the two revered speakers of the day, CA Ruchi Sadhana ji and Madam Yukti Arora, office, including CA, Mr. Arun Agarwal and CRT, and all participants have come here to go home all night. Ladies and gentlemen, you're all aware that your board, the Internal Audit Standard Board, is deeply involved in giving quality programs. I'm sorry I'm traveling and therefore there may be some technical glitches or loss of network or voice. So today's program is standards on internal audit, keeping pace with reforms. We are very keen to be hand in hand with the reforms and ensure that we give the best. So ladies and gentlemen, our coverage includes standard on internal audit SIA 310, planning the internal audit assignment. You're all aware that all assignments are specific to a part of the entity and therefore covering a particular auditable unit, may it be a location, a function, business unit, or a legal entity, including third party wherever relevant. The standard intends to provide guidance on the planning process, the knowledge of business and its environment to gel it with the normal planning systems, discussion with management, risk assessment of the entire business unit, audit methodology and depth of coverage, technology deployment, which is very pertinent today, resource allocation, and documentation. So largely we need to put ourselves accustomed to the fact that planning has to move in the right direction. We have to communicate with management. It is again very important because there should be clarity and consensus between the internal auditor and the management with regard to the scope. Very importantly, please mark my words. It is scope, approach, objectives, and timings of internal audit because everything is of paramount importance. Going ahead, we would like to speak on standard on internal audit 360, which is communication with management I have just discussed, but more importantly, the periodicity, the time, the manner in which communication has to be made is very important. Going ahead, we need to go on issuing of audit reports. All are moving in a chain. So we have to share with the auditing details of all significant findings based on audit procedures undertaken. We have to allow management to understand and take corrective steps on whatever we have highlighted. And we have to provide a sound basis for the assurance being provided by the internal auditor. All these facets are very, very important. We have also decided that today discussions shall happen on SIA 370, which are reporting results. So this standard largely speaks about the basis of internal audit report. Very, very important. Content and format of internal audit report, which has to be mutually decided by the client and the auditor, and documentation, which is again of paramount importance. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have two of the very relevant, experienced faculties, Madam Ruchi Sadana and both Madam Yukta, both have been on the board where we are formulating standards and have a deep insight. So I go on to CM Mahesh Garg so that he's able to effectively start the proceedings, and you all can move ahead into a greater impetus of learning and understanding things and going home without doubts. Thank you. Thanks for providing me this opportunity. Over to Mr. Mahesh Garg.
Thank you, Nanda sir, for the welcome address and keynote session. Before starting with the formal session, I would like to thank you and all the Central Council members for standing in support of all the chartered accountants who are protesting at Gurugram and taking necessary actions with regard to the GST department case. Friends, before starting this first technical session on SA 310, I would like to introduce our guest speaker for the first technical session, CA Yukti Arora ji. CA Yukti Arora ji is a CEO at Omea Consulting Services LLP. She has more than 2 decades of experience in the field of process and risk advisory. Besides from chartered accountant, she is also CISA and DISA and has previously worked as director with risk advisory function of Big Four. She has worked extensively in manufacturing, consumer, automobile, e-commerce, BPO, and IT sector. She is a regular faculty with the Digital Accounting and Assurance Board and Internal Audit Standard Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. She also regularly delivers trainings and lectures for ISACA and IIA Delhi chapter. Now I request CA Yukti Arora ji to formally start the first technical session.
Thank you, CA Mahesh Garg, Singhur Branch, Internal Audit Standard Board, Charanjot Singh Nanda sir, and also the entire Internal Audit Standard Board of ICAI. And thank you to all the participants for joining in. What I'm going to discuss today in next 45 minutes is on the standard of internal audit 310, planning the internal audit assignment. If you look at the overall structure, there are 2 aspects of planning. One aspect of planning is on conducting the overall internal audit plan. For that, we have SIA 220, wherein the entire audit plan is prepared and presented to the board and board approves it. And once that has been approved and that has been put into place, the next step is to conduct those audits, and therefore the first step in that process is doing the planning, because unless and until we plan, nothing goes well. So let us look at some of the questions. Let us ask ourselves some of the questions. Without knowing audit objective, without knowing why we are doing this audit, can we meet the expectations of stakeholders? Can we deliver the board members, the management, and all the interested parties the result they are expecting from the internal auditor? I think answer to this would be no. Because unless and until we know what we are auditing, why we are auditing, what is the purpose of this audit, it will be very difficult. Similar, like in any of the business aspect, in any of the real life aspect, in the practical aspect, unless and until we know the objective, the end result doesn't happen. So therefore, knowing the audit objective is very, very crucial, very, very essential to entire audit process. Second question which I have, can you, without thinking or gathering knowledge of what can be the risk or what can be the issue or what could go wrong, audit effectively and efficiently? If you don't know anything, you're just going there and starting the audit without knowing what could be the issue, what could be the challenges, what could be the problem which are being there. You will be just throwing a dart like that. So to be effective, to be efficient, to be able to cover to the extent where it is required, it is extremely important to understand the risk which is there, why we are covering this, what is the risk which is involved, what are the issues which are there, and therefore without knowing this, it is not at all possible to audit effectively and efficiently. The third question, can we execute audit engagement without knowing whom to talk to, whom to get information, from where to get the information, what data we want, what information we want, what is the source, and why do we want that information? Can we do that? I don't think so we can do that. Unless and until we know who is the process owner, who is the business executive sponsor, the control owner, what information will be provided by what person, from which source and from which place, and why we are wanting that type of information, it is not practically possible to do an effective audit. My next question, can we effectively deliver without proper team, without skill set, without expertise? If we are like, for instance, if we are given an audit to do the structure of audit of the civil structure, unless and until we have that expertise to understand how the civil structures are made, how they are evaluated, how the completion certificates, on what basis it is given, we'll not be able to do it, right? So unless and until we have that requisite expertise, for instance, if we are going and auditing the technology, the AWS cloud platform, unless and until we understand what this technology are, what types of risks are there, what types of controls are there, and have the skill set to know and deliver the technical assignment, we will not be able to deliver accordingly. So it is extremely important to have that skill set, that team to do it. Without team, individual person can only do that much, right? Then can we deliver on time without planning? If we don't have plan, for you would have experienced, unless and until you put a plan and with a proper time, things are never achieved. So this is basic. This is basis for the success. So without adequately planning, when we are going to kick off, what is the time in which the data has to be requested and provided? What is the time the meetings have to be conducted? What is the time of our field work? What is the plan which we have for the completion or the approach of completion of the things? What is the time when the board is expecting us to report, and based on that, management reports and comments have to be like obtained. So unless and until we have that complete information, it would not be possible. If we answer these questions, if we answer and plan for each one of them, I think we would have dealt with this internal audit standard 310, because it talks about exactly these aspects. Knowing the objective, understanding the risk, understanding the business, making sure that you have proper information, source of information, but planning to get the entire details from the applications, from the technology, having a requisite type of team members with the skill set, and also delivering the things as per the audit schedule. So these are the timelines for that. These are the basic, and these are the fundamental, and this is what is covered in this standard of internal audit 310, planning the internal audit statement. If you look at the entire Standards are divided into 4 aspects. One is the introduction, which sets the context. Then there is an objective, that what is the objective of that internal audit standard, what are the key requirements, then explanatory comments on each of those requirements, and the date from it when it is effective. So we'll start with the aspect of introduction. Just look at this table. Yeah, they are in the overall internal audit plan. You would see that there would be various aspects. One would be for procurement, one would be sales and distribution. Then there will be technology. Then they will be on the payroll side. So based on the overall risk assessment, overall objective of the audit, the overall internal audit plan is prepared as per standard 220, and that standard is giving us the way on how we have to plan the overall internal audit plan, how we have to prepare that internal audit plan. That's once that has been prepared, this is subject to approval by board of director, and once the overall internal audit plan is there, which has various audit elements. Let us assume that the first element is audit area of procurement as vendor and vendor master management. So that would be plan number 1. Second would be material procurement. So for each one of these, we have to prepare an internal audit assignment plan. The difference between the two is the first is at the overall level, the second one is at the individual assignment level. The first is approved by the board of directors, and the second one is approved by the internal audit head or the chief audit executive. So he reviews it, he looks at the plans, he ensures that the plan is properly done and prepared, and then he approves that plan. So that is the important aspect. Oh, this is done at a specific level, at an entity level, at an auditable unit level. It is very, very specific. It covers specifically the details to be looked from that perspective only. And they are generally conducted, like the overall internal audit plan will go for at least an year, for which it has been prepared. But these individual assignments, they will be broken down quarter-wise, and they may go for 1 month or 2 months, depending on the overall, the type of audit, the scope of audit, and the locations, functions, business unit, and details like of the audit plan. Now, let us look at this aspect, that what is the objective of internal audit planning? Why do we do internal audit assignment planning? See, the basic reason why we do internal audit assignment planning is to ensure that overall plan and the stakeholder expectations are met. We are aligned with the overall plan and the stakeholder expectation. Otherwise, what will happen is, if we do not do a planning, and if there's a whole plan and we do not break it, and we do not understand the objective, why it was scoped in, what was the reason, what was the objective, by the board of director or the management has given the input of it being included in the scope for the current year, it won't be met. So to align that purpose, that is why we do. To very, very carefully and clearly define what is going to be the scope. Because if the scope is not properly defined, the end result will never be achieved in an adequate manner. So scoping it right, what is going to be coverage, what type of approach we will be doing, what type of methodology we will be adopting, whether we are going to do a complete mechanism of doing a design, testing, implementation, and operating effectiveness, or we are going totally with a 100% audit approach of based on the data analytics and looking at each and every aspect of the transaction. So what approach, whether we are going with the checklist approach, whether we are going with the risk-based approach, what type of mechanisms we are going to do. By the way, we have to adopt risk-based audit approach. Then how we are going to do this entire thing? What will be the time frame? Whether the time is to complete the entire work is adequate or not? Whether we have adequate resources aligned to this thing to perform the task or not. Then also to have an effective audit wherein the results are properly presented, communicated, and all those aspects, and ensure that all the applicable pronouncements of ICAI are covered. So that is the aspect which we are going to cover when we do this type of audit. So these are the objectives from the standard. And if you read at it, it talks about that alignment with the overall plan. It talks about the core coverage methodology and ensuring that there is an allocation of time and resources. Audit procedures are conducted in efficient, effective manners, and then it conforms with the pronouncement issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Now, my next thing, what are the requirements? What are the key aspects which are required with respect to these type of thing? So the key aspects which the key requirements which are required are as follows. Planning process, the first thing you have to write, like how you are going to plan, what type of thing you are going to cover, how you will gather the information about the business and the environment, whom all you will interact, what type of discussions we will be having with the executive management, with the process owner, with the control owner, then, and what all inputs we will gather. How will we conduct the risk assessment? How will we analyze based on internal and external source of information and understand what is going to go wrong? What are the key risks? What are the key challenges? What are the key aspects which we need to do? What could go wrong? And based on that, identify the controls which are required to be covered for the purpose of audit. Then defining in a detailed manner the approach we are going to follow, the extent of coverage, whether for a particular control we'll be looking 100% or we'll be doing what type of sampling approach we will be following. All those needs to be covered at the time of planning. Then are we going to use some technology? Are we going to use some analysis? Are we going to extract the data through a script or through a runner tool to pull the information or do a data analytics? So that type of thing needs to be planned. Then who is going to do what? Who will be interacting? Who will be the person who will be doing the entire planning and signing off on the planning? Who will be the person who will be preparing and discussing and getting involved in doing the field work? Who will be the person who will be reviewing and discussing the findings with the management? And then how we are going to ensure that the technical skills, if they are any required, the right set of expertise is brought onto the table. And then what is the time frame in which they have to do, what type of mechanisms they have to adopt in communication, and all that is also very much required to be agreed with various stakeholders, that how the communication will happen, what will be the frequency of communication, what will be the mode and format of communication, that needs to be fully planned. And how we will regularly update and monitor the progress to ensure that the quality or the objective of the internal audit assignments are there. So these are the requirements which are there. And this is what exactly which has been written in the standard, that you have to cover all the processes, the outcomes in a very comprehensive manner. You have to ensure that the entire, the correct type of overall objective is attained, and the technology is deployed, resources are adequately deployed. This internal audit plan needs to be reviewed and signed off by the chief internal auditor. And then the person who is preparing this plan or understand and going to execute, they should have a good knowledge of the auditable unit. And for that, they need to interact with various people, get the information from the management, ensure that they also, if required, speak with the statutory auditor. Then based on that, we need to execute this plan, specifically focusing on the high risk area, and very much importance must be given to based on the sensitivity, complexity, and the importance of any particular aspect. There are certain regulations which are required to be covered, then those are covered as a part of this overall thing. The methodology needs to be aligned in depth to ensure an adequacy of the test internal audit engagement. Also, certain elements needs to be like what is important when we are going to kick off, how we are going to have the discussions, what all discussion, how we'll give the status update. If there are findings, how will we communicate those findings? All these needs to be discussed prior to the audit engagement start so that there is a smooth conduct of the audit. And then the progress needs to be regularly monitored. And if certain area, certain control we may not have planned at the beginning of the audit process, but during the audit process, we may come into like because of the information which we are gathering, the details which we are getting into, there could be certain new areas which could be added, or there could be certain things which we could have initially planned, those could be excluded. So those types of aspects we need to cover. Now, this entire planning process, if we look at it, it can be divided into three parts. Like first is the gathering phase or the knowledge phase. The second phase is understanding and analysis, and then and the output of this would be the internal audit plan. And this entire process requires the professional judgment to be applied, because you have to take decision from where you have to get the information, how you have to do, how you have to ensure that you can collect the correct understanding from internal and external sources by doing various industry benchmarks, understanding the overall framework in which the company is operating, and the independent audit assignment is there. So all those understanding one needs to gather. Then you have to apply your judgment in doing the analysis, seeking what could go wrong, understanding based on the previous experience that wherever there could be more risk which would be there, and including that in the assignment plan. So once this entire thing is there, the most important thing to conduct this audit is knowing the business and its environment. Unless and until we know the business and its environment, its key objective, why it was scoped in as a part of internal audit assignment, and what is the end result, we will not be able to be very successful in the execution of the internal audit assignment. So we need to understand what are the risks faced by the industry, what are the risks faced by that particular company in that industry. The risk could be on the financial side, it could be on the operational side, it could be on the compliance side, or it could be on the strategic side, or even they are newer risks on the technology sides which are also emerging. That could be the risk. It could be an external risk because of geopolitical or climate or these types of aspects, or it could be an internal risk which originates from the organization. So knowing what are the risk faced, for that we may refer to the risk assessment based on which the internal audit assignment was planned. Then we may look at what are the specific requirement of laws and the regulations or the contracts which have been there with respect to that particular area. So let us take an example. If we are doing an audit of a very simple process, let us say HR process, right? We are in the HR process, the area we are auditing is the recruitment, right? So we need to know what are the risks which the organization industry is facing in terms of getting the right skills, right expertise, and the type of sources which they are getting this information from, whether the aspect of legal and regulatory, if we are recruiting outside the country, then what are the legal and regulatory aspects which we need to consider while offering. All those aspects need to be done, and then the operational challenges which are being faced. So knowing that understanding the risk on the finance side, on the fraud risk side, on the business element side, on the industry dynamic, business model, operational aspects, and legal and regulatory and system and processes, these are key. These are fundamental to prepare the internal audit plan. If we do not know, like for example, on this HR process, if we do not know the type of industry in which the recruitment, certain part of recruitment, the person has to, there are certain consultants who are also recruited. There are some workers who are on the hybrid, on the flexible mode, which are also recruited with the different terms and conditions. If we do not understand the industry and the model and the approach in which the entire process operates, we will not be able to cover the entire scope well. We will also, for each one of them, there would be a different type of regulatory and legal requirement. So unless we understand that, we'll not be able to scope in and put in our risk assessment, the risks which are there with respect to the same. Unless and until we know how the recruitment process is going to be undertaken, how the sourcing of the profiles are done, and then how selection of it is done, and then how based on that the identification of the right candidates, and then the minimum 2 or 3 interviews as per the delegation of authority, the approval of those, and then automatically flow of those from those based on the selection to the ERP system for the creation of IDs. If we do not know the entire process and the operational aspects of it, we may miss certain activity, and that coverage would not be adequate. So we need to know the financial element, we need to know the system and processes which are followed for it, legal and regulatory aspects, business element, industry dynamics, and the model and operational integration. For knowing all this and to also get the complete understanding, it requires a regular discussion. Also, to do an audit effectively, the key to success is discussion with the people, because ultimately any process is run through people only. There is technology element, but the most important element or the decision maker or the key aspect is the understanding and having information from the management. So we need to understand the intricacies, matters which are relevant, and also know the entire process, and then accordingly prepare our audit plan. We need to discuss with the executive management. We need to understand from the board members that why they have scoped in a particular area, what was the key aspect they wanted to cover, what was the key risk while it is being covered, whether they wanted from a compliance perspective or an assurance perspective, or whether they wanted from a fraud risk perspective, or there are significant changes which has happened, that is why they want this type of thing. So we need to understand from them. Then we need to also look at the entire process in correct manner and have a discussion with the department head, understand from him how the overall process is structured, who is doing what type of activity, what are the key challenges or risks which he is facing, what are the key performance indicators they are having. And then based on that these points provide very insightful thing to prepare our audit plan. And from there, we need to take it further, understand who is the process owner, because ultimately on day-to-day execution, we will be interacting with the department head and the process owner. The process owner will be the key person whom we will be discussing our report first, and then the individual risk owner from whom we are going to cover and provide these types of things. Now, after doing this understanding and getting the knowledge, doing the understanding, the next step is to go ahead and prepare our risk assessment and risk-based audit assignment plan. So for that, we need to, based on whatever we have gathered, we need to understand what is most complex, what is most sensitive, what is most critical, what is the aspect which we is definitely required to meet the objective. What are the risks? What could go wrong? Where would be the challenge? Where could be the areas where we can have those observations which will be critical enough for the meeting the objective of that audit assignment area. Then to do this, we may also be required to go and have further discussions, look at the physical side, go and have physical visit, do a survey and collect those information, have information from the peers, from the industry, from the similar environment. And once we have gathered all these things, then from the inventory or the listing, identify which is the high risk, which is the medium risk, which is the low risk based on the risk mechanism or way, and focus on the key aspects. And this is the risk-based audit plan, and audit the same to highlight the gaps which are there at the design level, at the implementation level, and operating effectiveness level. To do a proper risk assessment, one, it is extremely important to understand the coverage which is required. And generally what happens is the IT controls, the IT general controls, the entity level controls, which sets the tone at the top, which gives us the overall governance process, which gives about the culture of the organization, how structures are there, how oversight and reporting mechanisms are there, how performance is measured. That brings a very, very important insight to understand which one we need to cover in much more detail, which one we can go and not like do it in a detail, because there's a very strong entity level control. There's a very strong IT level control, and therefore we may reduce the substantive testing, or we may reduce the 100% testing and do some control testing with respect to that particular area. Also, we must plan for any mitigation control. Like for instance, if something goes wrong, like if the control is ineffective, then is there any alternate control? Is there any other way which can be done? So we need to understand that alternative also while doing this entire internal audit planning. So our approach needs to be a comprehensive approach, starting from understanding the environment and discussion with the management and looking at the risks which are there, seeing for each one of them how we need to do and what area and what depth we need to cover based on our understanding of the entity level control, IT level control. Also, we need to look at the alternative mitigations, the controls which are there. So once we have this, then the next step for us is to go ahead and execute. So when we are planning, we need to look at the aspects of how we are going to cover the plan, how we are going to understand the objective, how we are going to do the risk identification, analyze the information which is provided, then provide the team with the debrief. Then what type of how mechanism we will be doing for field visit, whether we'll be doing on-site or off-site, whether we'll be going on field, how will we collect the information, how will we see the completeness and accuracy of it, what type of analysis we will be doing, what type of sampling approach we will be doing. If something comes, like how we'll do the root cause analysis and draft report, and then the report aspects of it. So these entire approach coverage needs to be covered for the entire audit plan which is there. Then we need to also look at if we require to deploy any technology, if the data is huge, information is very bulky, there is lot of varied information from various sources. So do we need to use some analytics tool? Do we need to use some query? Do we need to use some tools which will help us in analyzing at a better phase? That we need to do. Also, for doing our risk assessment, to gather the information, to understand the data, it is important that we use these technologies of data analytics to pull the information, read the structured and unstructured data, and understand how the trend is, how the information is, what are the key challenges where the figures are not properly matching, where the risk is very high, where the information is very skewed, where there is a fraud risk. So from doing these type of analytics to do the risk assessment, it becomes a very good insight for planning process. So we may think of deploying technology to do our internal audit planning and also for executing the internal audit engagement. So that needs to be covered as a part of it. And then the next step for is once we have done that is to get the right set of people available with the right adequacy of time so that they can deliver the project with in a quality manner. We need to look at what time we need to estimate and understand how much time it will do. It will require a close interaction with the management. It will require close interaction based on the data which is required or the data information which needs to be understood and analyzed. It will require a very good understanding of the overall business process and also the experience of the person who is planning in this entire thing. Then who are the skills, what type of competency, knowledge, expertise we require. If it is a very technical audit, then we may require an expert who is a technical expert in that particular field. For instance, if we are doing an audit of energy, then we may require the energy expert. If we are doing an audit of technology, we may require a technology expert. If we are doing an audit of construction, we may require a civil or the engineers or the architect who could be providing us the insight. If we are doing very regulatory aspect of it and the contractual expert, we may be requiring a lawyer to assist us in doing this type of audit. If it is a plant which is very or machinery which is very complex, we may require the expert who can understand that type of thing. If it is health and safety, we may require a health and safety expert for doing that type of work. So understanding the area and based on that mapping the expertise and then allocating and providing time so that they can execute in a quality manner is another very important aspect of internal audit planning. And once we have done all these things, then we need to document it. Documentation is one of the key aspects. Yeah, and unless and until we document it, communicate it, it is not sufficient. So we need to maintain following documents. One, the entire mechanism, how the planning process was done, whether what type of tools or technology we use for doing the planning, whether we use a checklist based approach or whether we collected information through interview or expo or went ahead and did some surveys. So how did we complete the planning process and what tools we use for doing data analytics to do our planning or for understanding the business, understanding the key figures or data which is there. So that needs to be clearly documented. Then we need to document the supportings, how we have identified the information about the business, its operations, about the system and processes, what were the past and the known issues, what were the things which were considered while drawing this entire internal audit assignment. Then we can keep minutes of meeting and summary of discussions which we have with process owner, with various aspects in the thing. Then we can cover the aspects of risk assessment. How did we do the risk assessment? How did we identify a particular risk to be a high risk or a medium or a low risk? And then what was the ranking which was done? Then the summary of was available people who are going to be deployed, the competency, the skill set, and how it is mapping to the area which we are going to cover. And then the detailed plan, giving the entire approach, methodologies, testing procedures, the design and implementation and the operating effectiveness expect the sampling approach which is to be followed, that needs to be clearly laid down. And then the overall plan needs to be reviewed and approved by the chief internal internal auditor, and it needs to be communicated to the various stakeholders, specifically at the time of commencement of prior to the commencement of audit, with the clear timelines of how the audit is going to be executed and what is the time for giving the draft report and then the final report and then presentation to the audit committee. So all these needs to be very precisely communicated so that they can also align their resources, they can also plan their time accordingly. Many companies use some tools for this purpose of planning, for the purpose of communication, for the purpose of doing the risk assessment. So if we are using that technology part of it, then in that technology, all these elements needs to be documented. So that's all on this SIA 310. If we have any questions, I can discuss that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, CA Yukti Rodaji, for such an engaging and knowledgeable technical session. We have few questions, but as told by Mr. Arun Agrawalji, we will take them after the conclusion of second technical session. Now, before moving toward the second technical session, I would like to introduce our second speaker for today, CA Ruchi Sadhana ji. CA Ruchi Sadhana ji is SRCC alumnus and did her CA in May 1997 in the first attempt with rank in All India Merit List in the CA final examinations. She is also a cost accountant and certified internal auditor from Institute of Internal Auditors USA. And she is also certified Sarbanes-Oxley expert. Ms. Ruchi has 25 years of post-qualification experience and she heads the Corporate Audit and Assurance Services Department for HCL Technologies Limited, a leading USD 10 billion global IT company with presence in approximately 50 countries throughout the world. She has been the part of CA Institute study group responsible for reviewing the auditing standards and drafted 3 audit standards, namely SIA 250, SIA 350, and SIA 390. Now I would like to invite CA Ruchi Sadhana ji for the second technical session.
Thanks, Maheshji, and good evening, everyone on the dais as well as off the dais. Thanks to Yukti for such an insightful session on 310. And I'll just share my screen. So hope my screen is visible.
Yes, it's visible. Yeah, it's visible.
So I'll be taking you through communication with management, which is SIA 360, and reporting results, that is SIA 370. So first we'll discuss the communication with management, which is SIA 360. So, it is very, very important for internal auditor to have the right kind of communication, and it is essential part of audit function. So what exactly is the communication? So communication is any information exchange between internal auditor and the management. And management, which is defined in this standard, is the person responsible, who has the executive responsibility to run the company's operation. So those guys would be management, and internal auditor oblique, internal audit department is on the other side. So, we actually have a lot of communication requirement at various stages of the audit. Like Yukti just spoke about that, initially while preparing the audit plan, when we actually need to understand what are the risk areas, and we ask management at that time, which area you want us to audit, so that there is a focus, and management also gains from the audited. Though we generally go for the risk-based audit, but process owners know their risk better than the internal auditor because they are the risk owners. So while preparing audit plan, we always ask management that what areas they would like us to audit, though the final choice remains with the internal audit head, what they will like to cover and what gets approved finally and by the audit committee. However, we initially do ask them. then, when we actually have any audit done, audit placed in the internal audit plan, then we advise, we give the intimation to the management that this audit will be starting from this particular date. It's an intimation, though the intimation can be in the nature of the engagement letter, which we generally send out to the audit process owners as well as management, that this would be the audit audit name, and it would be the scope, and what would be the who will be the auditor, what would be the time spent there.
Ma'am, the voice is not clear as being reported by the members.
Is it okay now?
Now it's fine.
Yeah. So I've come near to the laptop. So we actually, we give the intimation in the form of engagement letter, which talks about, what would be the audit, what would be the scope of audit, what would be the timelines, what would be the period of audit, who will be the auditors, what would be the approximate timelines of the execution of audit, and preliminary, work of the audit, execution of the audit, and along with that, what will be when the draft report will be released. So all these are something which is the intimation of audit. It's all communicated by the auditor to the process owners as well as management. Then comes, we have the opening meeting in any of the audit journey. And in opening meeting, a person from the management also, we prefer them to be there along with the process owners, so that the process owner understands that this report is very important, this audit is very important. So generally we expect somebody from the management also participate, or at least sponsors that opening meeting. So there is again a communication between the auditors as well as the management of the process owners. Then we keep on giving them the regular updates. So on the update frequency can be decided along with the process owner and the management when they want updates. If it is the duration of audit is 2 months, then it can be a fortnightly update or the weekly update. It all depends, but giving the updates and communicating to the management as well as the process owners that this is where the where we have what we were supposed to do and what we have completed in the audit. These are the sub areas out of which we have completed these sub areas, and these are the sub areas where we are getting the challenges. So all that should be communicated in those weekly or fortnightly updates which we are sharing with the management. Along with that, we also communicate the significant findings as and when we find that if the findings are of nature which requires immediate management attention. So generally auditors try to release a flash report or something. Suppose you are doing an audit of any organization, inventory audit or any factory audit, and you actually seem to find some kind of fraudulent transactions happening there, you will not wait the closing meeting to happen or the audit report to go or your weekly or fortnightly update to go. You will definitely, release a flash report to the management intimating that we found some fraudulent transaction there, which requires immediate attention of the management. So that is something, is another area where communication is very important, and timely communication and the way we are communicating is very important. If we see the fraudulent transaction happening and it still requires investigation, I think the way we are communicating to the management is matters a lot. That this is something we observe, though we are doing a deep dive, but this is something which is not which is something requires your attention, is something which we have to inform the management very carefully. So this is something.
Ma'am, members are asking to be a little slow as the sound is, there is some still blockage in the sound.
You want me to be slow or loud?
No, other members have.
Earlier you were saying that people are not able to listen to me.
No, ma'am. I am getting the messages from other members.
Okay. Okay. Just a second. I'll change. Is it okay? Is it better? I've removed my headphones. Is it better?
Now, yeah, it's better.
Okay. So we were on the significant findings, which is more like we share them along in the form of the flash report to the management. Then after the audit is done, we have the closing meeting before we release the final report. See, how the reports are to be released is something which we will discuss in the next SIA. But here, we are just talking about how the communication will happen. So closing meeting is also planned with the management and the process owners, so that whatever findings we have observed, we will share that with the management as well as with process owners, share our recommendation, agree on the action plan, and later on, even after we release the report, we still continue to have the communication for the follow-ups and the update of the implementation of the agreed action plans. So these are the various ways where the communication is required. And one thing is to be noted is the two-way communication. It is not a single-way communication. It is not that auditor only has been telling them. Auditor has been telling them as well as getting the constructive feedback also from the process owners as well as management. So this is the two-way communication which is required at the various stages of the audit. And this is something, this two-way communication is very, very important, and the continuous dialogue with the management is very, very important for achievement of the internal audit objectives. Otherwise, if this communication is broken at any given point of time, your audit will not be successful. So there are few essentials of the effective communication. It has to be accurate, because anything coming from the auditor, management and process owner try to take it very, very seriously. And in case they found that this is not accurate, the credibility of the auditor goes. So it is very important, whatever we are communicating to the management as well as the process owner, it has to be accurate. It has to be objective. It has to be without any bias. We can't afford to have our biased view depending on something which we know more than we can't have any communication which is biased. We have to have objective communication, unbiased communication. The communication should have clarity. It should not be something which is not clear to the management. Anything which is confusing will never be appreciated by management, and auditors tend to lose its credibility going forward. They will not take messages seriously in case these are not clear or are providing any kind of confusion or ambiguous messages are not acceptable. Then our communication has to be very concise, because we are communicating with the management, and management span of attention is not very high. It is generally low because they have to look into various things. They have to run their business. So auditor is finding out the issues in one particular area, but they can't give the complete attention. So it has to be very concise. You can't have the stories written on the for whatever you are trying to communicate. Then it has to be constructive. Whenever we are communicating, though, because in the audit we generally have to communicate not very pleasant things to the management. So instead of saying things are not happening right, we should communicate it in a way that it should look constructive. We should say that there is a scope of process improvement here. There is a scope of lot of improvement, instead of saying that there is gap everywhere. So more constructive our communication would be. More acceptable it will be to the management. It will be acceptable. It will be welcomed. Your report will be welcomed. If the report language or communication is full of negativity, people may not like it. So we have to ensure that people pay attention to our communication. Has to be constructive. Then again, it has to be complete. We can't give half-baked information to the management, because that's not expected from us. And timeliness is very, very important. If I'm communicating something to the management, after management knows it, from their own sources, then what is the use of, management getting this audit done from the auditor, because they know it better than you. So it is very important that we are giving we have the communication timely. Supposingly you found a fraud, and you are not even informing that, and you are waiting till the closing meeting, the fraud may continue till that time. So timeliness is very, very important in the effective communication. Is So all these are very, very important, which every auditor should keep in mind, because if your communication is not effective, you will tend to lose your credibility. We'll move to the next slide. So this particular SIA, objective is that there is a clarity and consensus between internal auditor and management with respect to scope, approach, objective, and timings of the internal audit. There should not be any confusion or a scope of ambiguity that, what would be the scope. So you are going to do the audit for a particular area or a location. So it's not that you have to communicate that very clearly that, this particular audit I'm doing for this particular areas only, and this will be my sub processes which will be done in the audit. And what would be my approach? Am I going to do a population audit, or am I going to do a sample audit? How am I going to find out? So all these things have to be very clear. What would be the objective of the audit? What kind of risk we are trying to identify and gaps we are going to identify? What kind of assurance we are looking at after doing this audit is something which is very, very clear to the auditor as well as management. Because if auditor is feeling that, in this particular audit, I'll do only sample, and I give those sample result only to the management, and management is looking forward to something bigger, and there is no consensus, then your whatever work you have done will not be welcomed by the management, and they'll not value your contribution. So it's always better to have the clarity, not only clarity, but the consensus also with the management that this is what we are going to do, so that there is no scope of ambiguity later on. Later, there has to be free flow of information. Free flow of information is, from our side as well as from the auditee side also, from the process owner side also. And in case there is any kind of conflict, then, internal audit head is supposed to, provide the resolution to that conflict. It happens many times in the real world when we go for the audit. The auditor versus process owners may get into conflict. This is very normal, but there has to be resolution of the conflict, which has to be, internal audit head is responsible for the resolution of conflict as per the standard. So this is what the requirements is. Again, the same, that clear, appropriate, and in line of agreed timelines. So internal auditor, the department should actually establish a written communication process as well as a protocol with the management. So generally, we have the audit manuals which we follow, where you have the various processes, policies, and all, which will be followed within the department of the internal audit. So there has to be a communication process mentioned, which should be, where we should have the proper communication done with the agreement, done with the management, that this would be my communication process. If the data should be given to me within these many days, if it will not be given, what would be the escalation matrices? So all those things, and where it will go after third escalation, how many reminders I will give before the escalation. All these things should be documented, and it should be clearly communicated to them, as well as it should be a part of the audit manual or some other document. So that this is a requirement of the SIA, that this documentation should be there, that what would be the communication protocol and the process. And this process is anyways outlining the modes and channel of communication, incorporate the channels of the communication, though it can be various, but generally something which is written, verbal is avoided, written is something which is considered. And in case we have the verbal communication, it's always better to put that in writing after verbal communication, that we, as per our discussion, this is something which has been agreed. Then periodicity and timelines of communication is again, we will have weekly updates and all. We will have opening meeting. We will have closing. All these things should be well discussed and agreed with the management. Then essential of, what essential information we will be communicating, how we will be releasing the flash report, to whom all we will be releasing the flash report is something which should also be considered or covered as a part of the communication process, which we are documenting along with the protocol of the escalation. And verbal communication has to be changed. It has to be confirmed as a written. and maintained as the audit documentation is something which is very important, because people will tell you something, they agree, and finally when you are sending the report, they'll say, no, I mean, we never agreed. This is very normal in the corporates. So corporate, or whenever you are doing the audit as an independent auditor also of any other company, if you are in consulting, is in audit and all, you can't afford to have any verbal discussion. Verbal discussions are okay, but any decision coming out of the verbal discussion has to be confirmed in writing. It has to be shared. If they are not confirming, you just say that, this is something which has been agreed. If that person does not come back, it means they have agreed. They have no other choice. Later, they can't say that we did not see this mail or we never agreed. Auditor has to complete its job. We can't expect them to say yes or no. We have to give it in writing in a way that it looks like a closed loop. We have to mention that you agreed on this point. In case you don't, in case you have any doubts, or in case you feel otherwise, please revert. If they are not reverting, it is assumed that they have agreed. So we have to be very careful what we are giving it in, what we discuss and what we are communicating. So this is what we have already discussed. These are the key elements of the. These are the explanatory comments which are there in SIA 360. It talks a little detail, but we have already discussed in the previous slide, that communication process and protocol would have, how the communication, what would be the channel, what would be the timelines, what would be the content, and then accurate, complete, and timely communication, which is the key, which I just shared. Though SIA is talking about these three, I have given 7-8 areas which are important for the communication, which is not mentioned in the SIA. So I thought it will be important for you guys. And the mode of communication can be anything like verbal or written, picture, video, and channel. However, it is always preferred to confirm it in writing later on, which can be shown as an evidence anywhere. And periodicity and timelines, again, nature and timelines to be decided with management, that how the escalation will happen, how many times after whatever period the data will go back to us. If it is not showing back, then after this many reminders we will escalate to this person. So all these things should be agreed. So all these things have to help the auditor as well as management for the timely and the smooth completion of the audit. And we have the next on the reporting, but nature of assurance. What kind of assurance it is? Is it a consulting assignment, or it is an assurance related assignment? All these things have to be well communicated in advance, and the significant findings are to be communicated as and when we find that, and it should be the part of the final reports also. So how we will ensure that we are complying with this SIA 360 is that we have to have the written communication process, the way I advised you in the beginning, that there has to be a communication process, a draft, which should be part of your audit manual or your audit processes, whatever documentation you have regarding the department's ways of working. That should have that, my communication process, that these all areas I have to cover, and what would be the protocol, whom they will escalate, whom the final report will be circulated, whom the initial discussion will happen, who all should be present in the opening meeting, whom all we will be communicating the flash report, whom all will be communicating the updates, because you will not be communicating the updates every week to the senior most people in the company. So you have to have all those things well documented. So, if you are complying with SIA, you have to produce this document, that you have this document available with you. And number two is which is important, is that essential information exchange, whatever we are doing, we have to ensure that is documented as a working paper to ensure that we are complying with the standard of internal audit 360. After this, we'll go to the reporting results. We'll take the questions at the end as advised by Arun. So reporting results, again, we have two kind of reporting results. One is something which is internal audit head reports in the audit committee regarding the result of all the audits they have done during a quarter However, this particular SIA 370 is primarily for reporting the results to the management and the various stakeholders. So we'll just go through this, reporting results SIA. So this objective of this particular SIA is how we should be issuing the audit reports, internal audit reports, and how we are going to share. Then how management should be given some time to understand the issues, take the corrective action, and then on what basis the auditor is providing the assurance to the management that we have the various kind of reports. All the controls are working fine. All controls are working fine except few observations. Controls are not working fine. Controls require a major improvement. Controls are not working fine at all. So these can be the category of the providing the assurance, and this is something which these guys this is something which we have to which is covered by SIA 370. So overall objective is to ensure that to highlight the effectiveness of internal controls and risk management process to enhance the governance in line with internal audit charter. This is something, these reports, whatever we are producing, and we are providing the kind of assurance on the controls, on the risk management process, is giving is an output of the internal audit function of this is the final output of the internal audit function, because how you have done the audit, how you have done the planning, how you communicated, everything is right if you have got right kind of report which satisfies the objective of the audit and objective of having that particular we are able to give our final comments on the internal controls and the risk management process. This 370 is actually overall objective of reporting results. This is the final product basically. We can have plan, we can have the resourcing, how we are going to do various things mentioned in the various SIAs, but this is the final output, and how we are giving the final output is something this particular SIA talks about. So internal auditor, so we actually, though this SIA is not giving any format of the report, but all components should be the part of the various reports or the final report. I do have that in the end of this slideshow, which is only to guide you, though it is not part of SIA 370. This is something based on our own experience in the industry. I have given in the end, what all should be the component of your report, which actually, make sure that you have covered everything rightly. So the internal audit reports, the requirement of this SIA is that we should clear, well-documented internal audit report, and it should cover the objective of that audit, scope of the audit, and approach. So objective is what we are expecting out of that audit. So if you are doing a factory audit, audit of a manufacturing process, then what is your objective? Because manufacturing process is very big. So what exactly you are trying to find out from that audit is, are you looking at the efficiency of the manufacturing process, or you are looking for some technical aspects of that manufacturing process, or in case you are doing an inventory audit, what exactly is the objective? Objective is to find out that inventory is available there, or objective is to find out inventory has been placed rightly there, and the movement seems to be smooth, or your objective is to ensure that we have the right kind of safety security around that inventory, or we have the objective of issuance of the inventory. But exactly is the objective, what we are trying to achieve, what from that particular audit is the objective of that audit, why we are doing that audit. The scope of audit is something like if you have various job countries in your company operates in, then the scope of audit would be that you are covering US related countries, US and Latin kind of countries, or you are covering Europe, or you are covering the Asia Pacific kind of countries. That can be the scope. If you are in a product line, then your scope would be that, if you have got 10 products, then your scope would be that I'm going to cover these 3 products or these 5 products or 4 products. These products which are high moving products or high value products are my scope of the audit. I will touch this audit and give you the report based on this particular, but this has to be agreed with the management. And what would be my approach? Am I going for the sampling approach, or am I going for the population based analysis, where I'm going to do the audit of the entire issue, whatever is there in that particular gamut, or I'm going to do only sample there, because nowadays you have got various techniques in Power BI and all, where you can do the population audit also. So you have to clearly mention the approach, how you will be proceeding for this audit, and how you're going to do this audit. This should be part of your report. And that, which is very, very important and critical, is if we want to comply with the reporting results SIA 370, we have to mention that it's a part of the report itself, that a fact that internal audit has been conducted in accordance with the standard of internal audit of CA Institute. So this is something which is very important. If you want to comply with SIA 370, this sentence should be part of your report in the beginning only, that audit has been conducted in compliance with all the audit standards. Then there should be executive summary of the key observation, which is requirement of this SIA. And then they are looking for the corrective action summary and the nature of assurance, which I just discussed, that whether this is a clean audit, and everything is fine but we audited, everything, all controls are working except 2 controls, which 2-3 pointers which we are going to write that these controls don't seem to be working. Yes, everything is fine. Or we want to say that report requires significant improvement, or the whole process is not working fine, controls are not fine. So these can be the various nature of assurance, which is these 3-4 areas are must, which should be a part of the report as per your SIA 370. Also, we can't afford to release any internal audit final report unless we have released the draft report and given time to the process owners and the management to revert back on the observation which we pointed out. So you can't say that you just release the final report unless you have given the draft report. You can't release the final report as something which we have to ensure. We'll go to the next slide. So the basis of the internal audit report is the audit. We actually have to mention the audit procedure conducted and the nature analysis of the audit evidences gathered. So conclusion reached shall be based on all the findings rather than on few deviations. So sometimes we actually, when we do the audit, we mention that we covered this. If you see any observation, we generally mention that we try to cover this audit procedure we have done. We have done the data analysis, or we have done the sample checking, and then we have reached out to be physically checked, and we have done the analysis of the audit evidences, and based on these facts, we have reached to this particular finding. So if you would have seen the reports, you always mention that we got 5 issues out of 50 samples noticed. You can't say I saw only 5. I saw 5 issues. Therefore, this control is not working. You have to clearly say it is 5 out of 50, or it is 5 out of 100, or 5 out of 1,000, because that shows, that fact will show the gravity of the situation. Because if it is 5 out of 5,000, then it is a very minor issue. But if it is 5 out of 50, it is very, very crucial, because it comes out to be 10%. So we have to be giving the conclusion has to be based on the facts and not because of something which few deviation or issues we noted. So otherwise, if I fail, unless you give it vaguely, the process owner will not accept it, because they know it is 5 out of 5,000, so they will not accept it as a significant observation. But as an auditor, we have to keep that in mind that how am I giving the conclusion of that particular audit observation? It has to be based on something factually right and right kind of data analysis. It's not based on something 4 or 5 points I observed, and this is the observation. Then we have to mention, which I've mentioned in the last slide, that the audit, these are the explanatory comments. So audit is audit is conducted in accordance with the SIA. So this is something, and we have to substantiate it with the supporting evidence and documentation, which is required by all the standards. Like your last standard 360 is talking about the communication manual or protocol should be available. The process and protocol should be available in writing. So all these things, I mean, we should have those things as a basis available with us to ensure that we have done the audit basis the SIU. So this particular sentence you can write only if you have the evidences available with you. If we don't have, and if there is any peer review and all, we fail. And if we fail, our credibility goes. So it is very important for internal auditor to ensure their credibility. Otherwise, it becomes the future audits become difficult, and auditor people don't accept you as it is. You will have to take a lot of effort to make your acceptability within the auditors in case you lose your credibility one. And believe me, if you have 5 observations and out of 5, 1 observation is weak, it's better to be very careful while putting that observation, because your 4 good observations can go. If you have 1 weak observation, the auditees and the process owner in the main meetings with the management and the senior most people will keep on talking about that particular thing which you could not do right, instead of talking about the 4 good observations. So this is a human psychology. So we have to ensure that if anything is weak, we better remove it, or we show it as an improvement area, or we show it very lightly. And wherever we are very, very strong, that only we should, put it actually when we are writing. If we are right, then that only we should put there in the report, in the internal audit report. And the content and the format of report is something, is talk about how you are drafting the report. And what I mentioned in the beginning, SIA does not mandate. Here, the professional judgment is to be applied. And I have few pointers, not a report format, which can be added in the report other than whatever has been explained in the first slide of this SIA 370, which we mentioned that your objectives, scope, approach should be there, executive summary should be there. Those 3-4 things are okay, which are must. Rest your professional judgment is there, and I have something to share with the next slide. Then documentation, we have to ensure that copies of whatever draft report and final report we have circulated, we should ensure that those mails are safely kept with us, that how we have actually circulated. And if appropriate, though it may not be possible nowadays, because we are releasing all the electronic reports, if possible, management action plan may be countersigned, but countersigning is something which is mentioned in SIA 370. But if you take it in the spirit, it is something where you have the agreement from the process owner that whatever you have mentioned as an action plan, they have agreed on that action plan. So when you release the report, clearly mention that this, as per our discussion, you agreed for this action plan, which we have mentioned along with the action dates. In case you have any issue or disconnect, please revert. In case you don't revert, it is an auto counter signing only, which is practically we generally do like that, and so that why all these things are required, so that when we have a final closing meeting or internal audit had a meeting with senior most people or the audit committee, none of the process owners come back or the management comes back, you have not done the right job and we never agreed on all these things. This is only to safeguard ourselves, because sometimes people, go back from their words also, whatever they would have spoken and whatever they have agreed with the auditors. And sometimes it's a comprehension issue also. Auditor is saying something, they are comprehending something else. So it's better to have that in writing. And therefore, SIA came up with this counter signing thing, which is nowadays being done only electronically. By the way, I'm saying that this you have agreed, and instead you have anything come back, else we are assuming it to be agreed by you. Something like that you can add when you are releasing draft a final report. So these are the suggestions which are not part of SIA, but when you actually have any kind of initially you have to have that when you start the report, you have to have that objective, approach, scope, and then you will give some kind of executive summary, and then statement that it is followed. But after that, when you go to the observations, what all should be there as part of your observation is the suggestive list which I have mentioned here. So when you are giving any kind of observation, for that observation, try to give little background, because you have done the audit of a big area. That particular observation you would have pointed out in the sub area. So give some background of that sub area, that this is the way the process should happen as per the process manual, or this is something which is required to be done, but we followed following observation. And then you mention the process gap, observation, or instance, whatever you observed while you did the audit or you noted. Then there should be a risk rating, which should again be agreed by the management. Risk rating chart must be agreed by the management, with management, that this particular thing, and generally risk ratings are approved by the audit committee also. And same should be followed, and what is the risk of this particular should be there, so that management knows very clearly that this requires urgent action, or this can wait for a while. So it can be red, amber, and yellow means a low kind of, you can give that bulb, or you can color this thing, or you can, if you feel that this is actually not a gap, we have to be very clear. Sometimes while doing an audit, we feel that though the things are happening in this way, it's okay, it is as per the process, but the process itself requires some kind of improvement. So as such, the people have performed as per the set process, but the process requires improvement. Don't show it as a gap. There's a big fight amongst and disconnect between an auditor and the auditee, when auditor tries to show that as a gap, which auditor feels in the mind should be the process. But that is not a defined process for the process owners or the auditee. So those kind of pointers should not be shown as process gap, and it should not have any risk rating. That should go in the end of your report as the process improvement. If you show it as a process improvement, it will be welcomed well. If you show it as a gap, they will not accept. As an auditor, nobody will accept that as a gap if it is anything has been done as per the defined, and you will be able to share your expertise. I mean, you are considered better than the process owner, and you are considered expert, that you can provide some out of the box kind of thought process. There, these process improvements really help if they are part of your reports. Then risk rating should be there, and for process improvement, there should not be any risk rating. And then, what is the impact of that observation? Try to quantify the impact. Unless you quantify the impact, people don't take your observations seriously. So even if you show the risk as red and there doesn't seem to be any impact mentioned, management will definitely ask you how you have written it as a red or high risk, unless where is the impact? What is the impact? What is the risk? What is the impact? So these are the basic questions of any management if they while accepting any audit observation, because after accepting the audit observation, they have to give you the action plan also, based on your recommendation. So and they have to make an extra effort. So unless you have the right kind of risk and impact shown in your observation, people will not do that extra work of what you want them to do or whatever you are recommending to them. So it is important to have the risk and impact mentioned as a part of the observation. Then you have to clearly mention the root cause also. This is something which is expected from the auditor, that if you find a gap, then do the root cause analysis, do an RCA, say that it is a design issue or it is an operating effectiveness issue. If design issue is when the process not designed properly, which is resulting in any kind of gaps, and operating effectiveness would be the process has been defined, but we still found the instances because people are not following that process. Then you must give the recommendation and clearly mention that this is going to be preventive recommendation and this is the corrective action plan which we expect the management to perform. Then management comment would be why this happened, why this issue happened. So we should give an opportunity to the management to give those comments, that so that, because this report is not it's not management comment, it can be the process owner comment also. This report is going to the high people in the management So they should know, the auditee also should be given an opportunity to mention why it happened. There may be something happened because of the lockdown procedures, and therefore they change the process. So all these kind of things should be there. There has been some kind of attrition, new person joined. So whatever comment they want to give, that why this issue has come out, they should be mentioned in the management of the process owner comment. Then there should be this, the last few things, the point after with effect of management comment is something which management has to give. Action plan also management, because whatever is up to recommendation is something which auditor is writing. Management comment action plan is all something which management or the process owner is giving you it in writing, or verbally you are putting that in writing in the report. So action plan, they have to give preventive, corrective action date. They have to give when the preventive action plan will be done, when corrective action plan will be done. Then who will be the actionable head, name and designation? Who will be the accountable? Accountable would be somebody like department head or someone very senior who would be accountable, and the designation. So all these things, if we have that as a part of the observation, it will really, you will be able to send your observation very easily, because everything would be visible what is expected from the auditor, and it will give a quick view to the management also that yeah, this point really carries the weight what my auditor has given. So this is all from my side. Thanks, Arun and Aarti. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Ruchi ma'am, for such a detailed and wonderful technical session. Now it's the time for question and answer session. Members are requested not to send their membership number, as attendance will be auto-generated from the system. First question is from Rajesh Chandra Sharma ji. Is risk analysis also a part of internal audit? Your voice is not audible, ma'am.
Yes. So risk analysis is, at what stage is if as a I'm doing some kind of risk analysis, then it is not a part of internal. I think at the time of planning, risk analysis is done. We have also with us because she covered audit planning, or I'll answer. So risk analysis is generally part of the audit planning, and when you release the report, that time also you have to see the risk of that particular gap which you have pointed out.
Next question is from Mr. K.S. Ravi. It is more important to know the business environment and audit objective. Being an internal audit will unfurl itself. Am I right?
I did not get the question. Please come again.
It is important to know the business environment and audit objective in an internal audit. Am I right?
Yeah, it is very, very important. Unless you know the business environment, unless you know what is objective of the audit, what are you going to perform? What will be the output of the audit? So, everything will be ambiguous, everything will be uncertain unless you have to have this thing very concrete. Audit objective is to be very clear. It should have the consensus with the management. This is something which will be the audit objective of my audit. And as far as business environment, without understanding business environment, no auditor can perform the right kind of audit.
Next question is from Mr. Nitin Sachdeva. In case of revision of audit plan, how it is incorporated after planning?
So generally the addendums are approved. See, if audit plan, you are talking about the audit planning you have an annual audit plan, and which is approved by the audit committee, and you want to make change in the annual audit plan or the next quarter. Suppose something you want to push the next quarter or something because of the change in that risk atmosphere, or because the people are you have to change that. If you change the audit plan, you are required to take the internal audit committee approval for change in the audit plan. There is no other way. Audit plan, which is internal audit plan, change can be approved only by the audit committee. Mahesh, what was it?
Next question is, should we communicate the objective and scope of the audit in the audit notification letter to the process owner? What else should be communicated to the process owner prior to the commencement of internal audit?
So, in the audit notification or the audit engagement letter, there are various things which we have to communicate. Number one is that name of the audit, scope of the audit, objective of the audit. Then, approach may not be required too much at that time. You have to share with them that, this will be my audit duration, this will be my audit period, this will be my audit team which will be doing the audit. If the audit has to happen from on-site, off-site, we will be traveling, so you have to support us, and then you have to support us with all the data. So all this should be, we will look forward to your support. All this should be the part of the audit engagement, and audit engagement should have the dates also, approximate date, that initial preliminary survey would be for this period, after that execution will be from this date to this date, approximate period, or draft report will be issued on this date, and final report will be issued on this date. All this should be part of the audit engagement letter of the notification.
Next question is from Mr. V. Iyer.
Who will be
How do you communicate issues relating to the violation of ethics, willful non-compliance of applicable laws by the KMP, which impinge on internal financial control? Is it sufficient for internal auditor to bring this to the notice of the audit committee?
Yeah. Generally, these kind for KMP and all the things are always communicated to the audit committee only by the head. These are not, these things are generally communicated directly to the audit committee, and they may not even wait for the audit committee to happen. They generally try to share that information as a flash report directly to the audit committee chairman. Internal audit head shares that with the internal audit committee. Immediate basis. It's not that they generally don't wait till the time we have the proper audit committee.
Next question is from Mr. Nitin Sachdeva. After issue is identified, how is impact or value determined? Recommendations is provided by the management and must be deemed suitable by the auditor? Question mark.
So there are 2-3 steps here. Identify the issue. You should try to come out with the quantification impact of that particular issue. If you can't quantify that particular impact, so supposingly you came out with any observation that this discount has been given higher, which is mentioned as per because you had some logic issue in the calculation. So the high discount has gone. So this is an issue. Okay, from instead of 5%, 7%. Now you will quantify that what has been the sales in that particular period. And you can always quantify whatever has been the sale in the entire year also. You will first quantify for your scope period, and then you can quantify for the entire year, since when this issue is prevailing, that this is the amount which company lost because of giving higher discount because of some kind of logic issue in your automation. Instead of 5%, 7% discount was issued by your automated control failed. So that is the quantification where you will give the amount. So one is that. The next question was something related to the recommendation. So
recommendation is provided by the management and must be deemed suitable by the auditor.
Recommendation has to be provided by auditor. Process owner has to accept that recommendation, and in case they don't accept that particular recommendation, then they are trying to say that then they have to provide the alternate. First recommendation should go from the process owner. Auditor. If process owner feels the recommendation given by auditor is not right, then auditor will say, okay, you tell us how you are going to bridge this gap. Then process owner may come out with some kind of recommendation. After auditor recommendation fails, if process owner comes out with some kind of recommendation and this is accepted by auditor also, that with this kind of action plan, because auditor is not supposed to be knowing the best, they can only provide. Process owner may know little more than the auditor, so they may say, no, we'll do it in this way, this will bridge the gap. If auditor gets satisfied that, okay, you are going to bridge this gap in this way with whatever you are advising with that control, this gap will be bridged, auditor will accept and show it as a action plan from the management side. And they will say, the auditor will change the recommendation and make it like that. However, in case auditor feels that whatever recommendation or process improvement or process owner is suggesting is not going to fix the gap, then it is very clear that the gap is still open, and then if they are not willing, then it will be more like company accepting the risk. It will be taken to the management and later to the audit committee that management is accepting this risk. There is no way they are not going to. I mean, this gap cannot be bridged.
Next question is from Mr. Vishwanathan. While reporting on the findings, even the risk rating is required to be given by the internal auditor to bring to the attention of the stakeholders the high risk, the medium risk, and low risk items. What is your view on the rating of risk of these various findings?
So the rating of risk is generally finalized by the internal audit department. It is supposed to be agreed with the management and approved by the audit committee. So the risk rating can be of various things. It can be on company's repute, it can be on the financial loss, it can be on something law-related non-compliances. At what particular, if it is just a fine, it can be low rating. If it is a repute loss, it can be high risk rating. So all that, there is a risk rating matrix, which is defined by the auditors. It is approved by management. It is consulted with the management and finally approved by audit committee. So that risk rating auditor has to apply on every observation which they are giving as part of the report. So that management also knows that you can't make everything red, you can't make everything high. You have to follow the risk rating metric approved by audit committee for giving the rating to your observations.
We are done with the question and answer session. If anyone is still having questions, they may send us now. Mr. Arun, there are some questions regarding the presentation and how can the presentation be accessed. Can you clarify on that?
Sir, that will be made available to all the participants afterwards.
Okay. Thanks, Ruchi ma'am, for the session. Now, the Vice Chairman of the Internal Audit and Standards Board, CA Gyanchand Mishra ji, the Central Council member, has also joined us today. Before handing over to Mr. Gyanchand Mishra ji, I will formally introduce him. Mr. Gyanchand Mishra ji is currently the Vice Chairman of the Internal Auditing and Standards Board of the ICAI and Committee on Management Accounting and Continuing Professional Education Committee. He is also a member in approximately 23 other committees of ICAI also. Now I hand it over to Sri Gyanchand Mishra ji for concluding remarks and vote of thanks.
Thank you, Mahesh Garg ji, MOC of the session. Very respected in absentia, Sri Charanjot Singh Nanda ji, Sahil Agrawal ji, Chairman, and I think Yukti Arora Madam has also completed her deliberation. So in her absentia, and very respected CA Ruchi Sadhana Madam, very respected and distinguished speaker on the topic of very important need of the hour, that is SIA 360, 370, and of course the 310 planning of the internal audit. Friends, internal audit has always been the core area for the management to take their very integral and integrated decisions to make the business flourish more and more. It has been the venture which the auditors have undertaken with very due care and due performance-oriented work, because this is the thing which the management is looking for their internal decisions makings. While preparing for the internal audit, there are various aspects to be considered as part of the SIA 310, and of course, the topic being deliberated by Ruchi Madam, that is related to the communication with the management and reporting results. Hence, we all know that the business organizations are taking pace, and of course, the risks are inherent. But when it comes to the internal audit, the internal audit systems and controls are devised in such a manner so that all the inherent weaknesses could be checked at any point of time. Although there might be some other risks which are always there with the business, but still a good control system has all the integral factors which can have check and balance on the internal risk control. So friends, I will not take much time. I hope that you all have enjoyed the session at length. Both the women empowerment have deliberated in length. I congratulate the branch chairman and his entire managing committee, including Secretary Mahesh Gargji, are taking this initiative and making this program a wonderful success. I'm sure that the board will keep on doing the hard work in the interest of the members at large. And once again, I congratulate each and everyone, including the officers of the institute, are taking initiative or organizing such wonderful program in the interest of the profession at large. So thank you, one and all. Good night. Have a blessed day.
Once again, thanks all the members who have spared their valuable time for this webinar. We had more than 1,500 members joining in today across all regions. Thank you all. Jai Hind, Jai IC.